Most people don't realize how many lives quietly end on an ordinary Monday morning. Not with a scream, not with a witness, but with an absence. A routine that breaks just once, and by then, it's usually already too late. In Delmar, New York, behind a locked door, in a neighborhood where nothing like this should ever happen. That's exactly what unfolded for Peter Porco. When Peter Porco, a well-liked law clerk, didn't show up for work on Monday, November 15th, 2004, after coworkers couldn't reach him, police were sent to the home he shared with his wife Joan in Delmar, a quiet community just outside of Albany. When officers arrived, they immediately noticed a key still in the lock of the front door, along with small droplets of blood on the porch. They also discovered that the house alarm hadn't been triggered, meaning someone with the code had dismantled it. And strangely, the keypad for the alarm had been smashed. Inside, the scene grew far worse. At the bottom of the stairs, officers found Peter, covered in blood and unresponsive. Upstairs in the bedroom, they found Joan, gravely injured but still alive. Blood covered the room, and investigators recovered an axe used in the attack. An axe prosecutors said came from the Porco's own garage. Among the investigators was Detective Christopher Bodish, who had prior familiarity with the Porco home from earlier police activity there. As medics worked to stabilize Joan, Bodish later testified that he asked a brief series of yes and no questions. According to that testimony, she nodded when asked whether she knew her attacker. When he asked her whether it was a family member, she nodded again. To understand the weight of that moment and what happened next, we need to first understand who the Porcos were. Peter and Joan had been married nearly 30 years, building a stable life together. Peter worked as an appellate division law clerk. Joan was a child speech pathologist. They had 2 sons, Jonathan, serving in the Navy, and Christopher, a student at the University of Rochester. Like many families, they had financial stresses and disagreements, but there was no public record at the time suggesting a history of violence inside the home. Once the scene was secured and Joan was rushed to the hospital, detectives began examining the physical evidence that suggested Peter Porco had remained alive for a short time after the attack. According to forensic testimony, bloodstains outside the master bedroom indicated that after being struck, Peter moved beyond the upstairs hallway. Investigators documented transfer stains and droplets leading toward the staircase, along with smears on the banister, consistent with someone gripping it while descending. On the main floor, several kitchen items showed signs of disturbance: blood on the refrigerator handle, a partially open drawer, and stains on a nearby light switch. There were also bloodstains on the inside of the front porch and on the porch area immediately outside it. Detectives noted this is an indication that Peter may have opened the door at some point after the attack. However, what they found in the lock raised an even more significant question. Investigators later testified they believed the attacker, not Peter, used the key to enter the home without triggering the alarm system. No evidence suggested Peter retrieved it himself. During trial, medical experts testified that in rare cases, individuals with severe head trauma may retain the ability to perform limited, automatic movements for a brief period. This testimony was offered to explain how Peter may have moved throughout portions of the home after the attack. Taken together, the blood patterns, disturbed items, and the key in the front door formed a sequence investigators used to construct the early timeline of events. Meanwhile, as detectives continued searching for answers, Jonathan was quickly accounted for through the Navy, but Christopher wasn't. By this point, police still hadn't contacted him. Instead, it was the press.
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by the Times-Union saying that my parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information for me.
Hey,
started
good.
from...
Whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, you're in Rochester?
Yes.
And you're hearing from the Times Union?
Yeah, they called me and said my parents were found, I guess, I don't know, they didn't say how or anything.
That was one of two calls that Christopher made to 911. In the second one, the police collected a bit of info on his alibi and tried to pin down the last time Christopher remembered talking to his parents.
When was the last time you said you came down and saw your parents?
About 3 weeks ago. It was on a weekend. I can't give you a date. I have to figure it out. I'm not really sure.
Okay, but about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
So you will be here probably, you're going to go right to Albany Med?
I don't know. I don't even know where my mom is, but...
Yeah, she is at Albany Med.
Okay. Do you know her condition?
No, because I haven't talked to her. Let me give you my pager number.
While detectives continued gathering information about Christopher, they also pursued other leads. One of the early avenues involved looking into whether the attack could have been connected to someone outside the family. That includes speaking with friends, neighbors, and co-workers. Investigators also reviewed whether the Porcos had any known threats in the months leading up to November 2004. They also considered whether the attack might have been random or tied to a burglary gone wrong. But the lack of forced entry, the dismantled alarm, and the absence of stolen valuables made the scenario less consistent with the scene inside the home. Another lead involved looking at extended family connections. One of the relatives detectives reviewed was Peter's uncle, Frank Porco, who had a criminal history and past ties to organized crime. Because of that, investigators examined whether there was anything in his background or among the people he'd been associated with that could be relevant to the attack on the Porco home. They looked at his criminal record, his known connections, or whether he had any ongoing disputes that might have affected the family. After checking those angles, detectives didn't find any evidence linking Frank or anyone connected to him to the events of November 15th. Detectives also reviewed Peter's professional life. As a law clerk in the New York State Appellate Division, he'd worked on a wide range of cases. Investigators went through recent matters to determine whether any of them might have posed a risk to him or his family. Across all these interviews and record checks, investigators were trying to understand the broader context, who the Porcos interacted with, what their routines were like, and whether anything in their recent lives pointed towards someone outside the home. As the leads were followed, documented, and either pursued or ruled out, detectives continued building their timeline, piece by piece. Back in Delmar, investigators revisited earlier reports of burglaries at the Porco home, including one from 2002 that prosecutors would later argue had been staged. Investigators also noted that a laptop reported stolen during a later break-in appeared on eBay through an account they said was connected to Christopher, and neither incident showed signs of a forced entry. Detectives then reviewed financial documents and emails from the months leading up to the attack. They found concerns about academic performance, loan applications investigators believed may have included forged signatures, and disagreements involving money. Several emails showed Peter confronting Christopher and asking for explanations. They also worked to verify Christopher's account of the night of the attack. Students couldn't confirm he'd slept in the lounge. Surveillance footage showed a yellow Jeep Wrangler, consistent with Christopher's, leaving the campus around 10:30 p.m. and returning the next morning. Toll collectors later recalled seeing a similar Jeep overnight, and a neighbor reported seeing one in the Porco driveway. None of these details proved anything on their own, but each added one piece to the investigative record. Before we continue into this case, I want to take a brief moment to speak directly to those of you watching. If this is your first time finding Minds of Madness here on YouTube, welcome. We're really glad you're here. Alongside these video episodes, Minds of Madness is also a long-running podcast with a back catalog of over 300 episodes. Stories you can listen to anytime. So if you ever want to continue these stories when you can't just watch, then you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Subscribing there gives you access to years of carefully told cases. Going forward, we'll continue releasing our weekly audio episodes, along with additional audio and video episodes here on YouTube every other Thursday. We're calling these episodes Between the Madness. I also want to thank our editor, Aidan Wolf from Dark Corner Studios, whose work shapes every episode you hear and see. And a special thank you to Sennheiser for supporting the show with their MKH416 microphone. This is my first time recording an episode with it, and its clarity really speaks for itself. And with that, let's get back to the story. As the investigation progressed, Joan's early responses remained central. According to her testimony, she indicated she knew her attacker, that it was a family member. She ruled out Jonathan and identified Christopher. Detectives weighed this alongside the physical evidence and presented the case to a grand jury. Christopher Porco was later indicted on charges of second-degree murder and second-degree attempted murder. Meanwhile, Joan underwent extensive medical treatment. Surgeons repaired multiple skull fractures, replacing several inches of bone. When she regained consciousness, she said she had no memory of the attack. She also stated she didn't believe Christopher had harmed her or Peter and continued to support him. By the time the case went to trial in 2006, Christopher sat at the defense table while Joan appeared in court daily, sometimes hugging him before proceedings began. The prosecution argued that the circumstantial evidence formed a coherent narrative. The disarmed alarm, the lack of a forced entry, the axe from the garage, the Jeep's movements, the prior burglaries, the financial disputes, and Joan's early responses. The defense countered that the case lacked direct proof, no fingerprints on the axe, no blood in Christopher's Jeep, and no eyewitnesses placing him inside the home. They questioned the reliability of Joan's earlier responses and emphasized the circumstantial nature of the evidence. As the trial continued, one of the witnesses the jury paid close attention to was Christopher's older brother, Jonathan. Jonathan was serving in the Navy at the time of the attack, stationed out of state. He hadn't been in Delmar that night, and his role in the trial wasn't about placing anyone at the scene. It was about helping the jury understand the family relationships. When Jonathan took the stand, reporters in the courtroom later described his demeanor toward Christopher as distant, even icy as one outlet put it. And when the questions turned toward the relationship with his younger brother, he described it as strained. His testimony didn't establish guilt or innocence, but it added yet another layer to the family dynamic the jury was being shown. One that contrasted with the steady public support Joan had given Christopher throughout the case. After closing arguments, the jury began deliberating on August 10, 2006. Later that same day, they returned with their verdict. Christopher Porco was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of his father Peter, and second-degree attempted murder on the attack of his mother Joan. In December 2006, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life, requiring a minimum of 50 years before being eligible for parole. Joan has continued to support her son. Jonathan has kept a low profile, and the family largely withdrew from public view. Following his conviction in August 2006 and his sentencing later that December, Christopher Porco continued to maintain his innocence. Over the years, he'd filed several appeals and post-conviction motions, including a motion under the New York Criminal Procedure Law 44010. In it, his legal team argued ineffective assistance of counsel and raised due process concerns. Because the newly elected Albany County DA was the son of one of Christopher's former defense attorneys, the review of that motion was reassigned to the Schenectady County DA's office. Christopher has also spoken publicly about his case. In 2023, he sat down for an interview with WTEN reporter John Gray. In that interview, He reiterated his position by adamantly denying any and all involvement with the attack on his parents. Throughout the interview, Christopher also spoke about the role his mother continued to play in his life by saying, "We speak every day. She's borne the brunt of this without a doubt. She's endured much more than I ever will." In addition to appeals, Christopher has also challenged how his story has been portrayed in the media. In 2013, Lifetime aired a docudrama titled Romeo Killer, the Chris Porco story. Christopher filed a lawsuit claiming the film had used his name and likeness without proper consent. Under New York civil rights law sections 50 and 51, a trial-level judge initially issued a temporary injunction blocking the film's release. But New York's appellate division later reversed that ruling, finding the movie qualified under the newsworthiness exception, and the lawsuit was dismissed. Through it all, Joan Porco remained publicly supportive of her son. She stated she believes he's innocent and continues to maintain a relationship with him. Jonathan Porco, Christopher's older brother, has kept a low public profile, and the family's private life largely remains outside the media. But one truth has stayed at the center of the years that followed the trial. Joan survived an attack few people survive and has stood beside the only person ever charged with that crime. When you step back from the evidence, the timelines, and the family dynamics, you're left with a story as complicated as it is tragic, a case built on circumstantial evidence, forensic analysis, medical testimony, and contradiction. A family changed forever, and a reminder of how fragile the lines are between what we think we know and what remains behind closed doors. Thanks again for watching my very first video episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, take care of yourselves and each other.